The topic that we are going to discuss is about cultural perceptions and identity, with focus on developmental model of intercultural sensitivity or DMIS, as pioneered by Dr. Milton Bennett. Let me start on cultural identity and perceptions. Author Robert Allen said that cultural differences should not separate us from each other, but rather, cultural diversity should bring a collective strength that can help all of humanity. To understand this, let us differentiate cultural identity from cultural perception. Cultural identity refers to identification with or sense of belonging to a particular group based on various cultural categories, including nationality, ethnicity, race, gender, and religion. A person's understanding of his or her own cultural identity develops from birth and is shaped by the values and attitudes prevalent at home and the surroundings. Noting that the cultural identity, in its essence, relates to our need to belong. Everyone needs to feel accepted and at home with a certain group. It acknowledges that culture influences our beliefs about what is true and false, our attitudes, including our likes and dislikes, our values regarding what is right and wrong, and our behaviors. It is from these cultural influences that our identities are formed.
Here are some of socially constructed cultural identities. Norms, informal unwritten rules that govern social behaviors. We also have languages, festivals, rituals and ceremonies, holidays, pastimes, food, and architecture. Cultural identity is an important contributor to people's well-being. Identifying with a particular culture gives people feelings of belonging and security. It also provides people with access to social networks which provide support and shared values and aspirations.
On the other hand, cultural perception is how an individual's culture affects the way he or she sees the world. Since culture informs all areas of life, including the norms, languages, food, and etc. Perception is significantly impacted by culture. Cultural experiences shape our perception of the world by making one think differently towards people originating from other parts of the world. They influence our perception by making people live in one way, but in reality, many people live different ways throughout the world. A person's culture affects how he or she views people.
Every experience we have shapes who we are in one way or another. A seemingly unimportant experience may simply change how you feel one day, which can cause a chain reaction of how you act a certain day. And how you act that day could affect your life as a whole. Our identity is simply a collection of experiences. Culture can shape our view of the world. It sounds way too obvious to even be an argument. Many studies have shown that people from different cultures see and perceive things differently, and that is probably due to how their culture shaped the way they view the world. Understanding people's cultural identity, background, or even perceptions could help us recognize the actuations, feelings, and attitudes of the people around us. And in doing so, we can relate with them without much difficulty and struggle. Thus, smooth relationships can be observed. When we reach this stage, it would mean that we are culturally sensitive.
what and how, then we can become culturally sensitive. To fully grasp this concept, let us discuss the developmental model of intercultural sensitivity, or DMIS, as pioneered by Dr. Milton James Bennett, an American sociologist who created this model. This is an important framework that explains how people experience and engage cultural differences. DMIS is a grounded theory based on constructivist perception and communication theory. It assumes that the experience of reality is constructed through perception, and that more complex perceptual categories yield more complex, sophisticated experience. Specifically, the DMIS assumes that we are constructing boundaries of self and other in ways that guide our experience of intercultural events. According to him, this ability to have more complex personal experience of otherness is termed intercultural sensitivity. Intercultural communicative competence is the forming of intercultural sensitivity into behavior that coordinates meaning across cultural context with more or less the same ease that one coordinates within one's own culture. Notable behavioral forms of intercultural sensitivity are empathy, the generation of appropriate behavior in alternative context, and meta-coordination, the third culture contexts that generate value from cultural diversity.
Following a process of grounded theory development, the developmental model of intercultural sensitivity codified observations about people who were becoming more competent intercultural communicators in both academic and corporate settings. The DMIS stages are construed both in terms of basic perceptual structures vis-a-vis otherness and in terms of certain issues regarding cultural difference that tend to be related to each of the stages. The names of the stages refer to the issues, while the description of the experience of each stage refers to its perceptual structure. The first three stages of denial, defense, and minimization are ethnocentric. They refer to issues that are associated with experiencing one's own culture as more central to reality. The last three stages of acceptance, adaptation, and integration are ethno-relative. They refer to issues associated with experiencing all cultures as alternative ways of organizing reality. Movement through the stages is not inevitable. It depends on the need to become more competent in communicating outside one's primary social context. When that need is established, it is addressed by building more complex perceptual structures that can resolve the increasingly complex issues of dealing with cultural difference.
As mentioned, DMIS has 6 stages, namely denial, defense, minimization, acceptance, adaptation, and integration. Before we dig deeper into the concept of DMIS, I want you to analyze each of the following situations, phrases, and statements and determine the stage of intercultural sensitivity it shows.
Write the letter of your answer in the box. You have 5 minutes to accomplish the activity.
Now that you're done answering, let us check from the 13 situations the items that belong to the first stage. Check from your answers whether you got it right for this stage. Let's see. 2 of those situations are in this stage.
I don't think SPED learners shall continue the STREAM program because they also have environment appropriate for them. In international trainings, participants who cannot speak English fluently shall not be allowed to join.
The default condition of DMIS is the denial of cultural difference. The failure to perceive the existence or the relevance of culturally different others. This is the state in which one's own culture is experienced as the only real one. In this stage, people fail to recognize distinctions among cultures or consider them to be irrelevant. Other cultures are avoided by maintaining psychological and/or physical isolation from differences. People at denial stage generally are disinterested in cultural difference, although they may act aggressively to eliminate a difference if it impinges on them. People here lump other cultures into vague homogenized categories such as foreigner, immigrant, Asian. They stereotype, demean, or dehumanize others by assuming that different cultural dispositions must be the result of deficiencies in character, intelligence, physical ability, work ethic, or other innate traits. They avoid other cultures through naive statements such as, "Do they have toilets in Africa? Those families just don't value education. If they really cared about their children, they would show up to more school events." In organizations, denial is a condition wherein there are no structures like policies and procedures to recognize and deal with cultural diversity. The issue experienced as denial is created when people who prefer stability or sameness are forced by some circumstance to become aware of others or differentness. Resolution of the contradiction involves beginning to perceive others in more specific and complex ways. Personally, this occurs when others are personified through media or personal contact. Organizationally, resolution of denial occurs when difference is acknowledged by procedures such as multiple language forms or incorporating visual diversity. This can also be resolved through the following strategies. 1. Develop better skills of category discrimination. 2. Become more sophisticated in thinking. And 3. Become more complex in cognitive processing.
When the resolution of denial issues allows it, people can move into the experience of defense against cultural difference. At this stage, please check the situations you chose from the given activity. Here are 2 of them.
Only male teachers shall be allowed to be assigned in far-flung barangays. I don't think including Korean language in our curriculum would do good to our learners.
The perceptual structure of this stage is a dichotomous categorization of us and them, where others are perceived more fully than in denial, but also in highly stereotyped ways. People at this stage tend to be critical of others' cultures and apt to blame cultural difference for general ills of society. They experience us as superior and them as inferior or the reverse. A variation of defense is reversal, where people switch poles so that them are superior and us are inferior. People in this form tend to simplistically romanticize or exotify another culture while being more complexly critical of their own culture. This is the state in which one's own culture or an adopted culture is experienced as the only good one. Occurs when people perceive other cultures in polarized, competitive, zero-sum, or us against them terms. Let us look at the defense stage against cultural difference in a workplace or in school. This can be observed when discriminating or belittling others, treat colleagues as competitors, feel victimized or attacked during discussions about bias, racism, or etc. Expressed fear that greater racial diversity in the student population will inevitably lead to more in-school behavioral problems, drug abuse, and violence. Further, the defense stage may manifest as parent protest or community opposition campaigns against racial integration, out-of-district busing, and equitable school funding. Resolution of defense is accomplished by focusing on commonalities, equal humanity, shared values, and etc. In organizations, defense is routinely resolved through the following strategies. First, be aware of your own biases and prejudices. Being aware of your own attitudes will help you initiate things from a fresh perspective. Second, notice the little things. Someone from a different cultural background might behave in a way that you interpret as rude, shy, or unfriendly. But that could simply be the way you interpret it. You need to think deeper and really acknowledge that what you call truth is actually just accumulated information from your own cultural background. Third, communication is the key. A gesture or custom that you're indifferent to might offend someone from a different cultural background and vice versa. Fourth, be flexible. In a professional environment, always respect others' customs, such as national holidays, dietary requirements, and political attitudes. And lastly, fifth, be yourself. We are all human at the end of the day, and you'll often find that smiling and offering a friendly face are universally recognized behaviors, wherever you are from.
The resolution of us and them allows the move to the minimization of cultural difference. Have you chosen the right situations in the given activity to this stage? Please check your chosen situations. Here they are.
All lives matters. All teachers, regardless of their religion, shall join the Christmas celebration.
As the term implies, Cultural differences that were initially defined in defense are now minimized in favor of the assumably more important similarities between self and others. Those similarities are based on the familiar elements of one's own cultural worldview. People assume that their own experiences are shared by others, or that certain basic values and beliefs transcend cultural boundaries and thus apply to everyone, whether they know it or not. The stressing of cross-cultural similarity generates tolerance, wherein superficial cultural differences are perceived as variations on the shared universal themes of humanity. People at minimization believe that all people are the same. It always manifests in arguments that human similarities are more important than cultural differences. The minimization issue for individuals is their desire to project similarity on a wider world and the stubborn resistance of that world to losing its real difference. This means that the more contact people seek out with others in the name of shared values, the more likely it is that they will be forced to confront significant cultural differences. Something similar happens in organizations. Overstressing of unity yields too much uniformity. In this stage, people believe that everyone is just like me. Here are the things to do in minimization of cultural differences in a workplace. Number 1. Teamwork. It is important to have an open mind towards the new culture. Embrace teamwork activities and sharing of tasks rather than focus on individual differences. Number 2. Model the right behavior. Everyone in the workplace should lead by example, as well as embrace and respect diversity. Number 3. Awareness. A good way to get to build a healthy work environment is to celebrate cultural differences and make everyone aware of your co-workers' perspectives, habits, and way of life. Number 4. Communication. The best way to practice effective communication in a multicultural environment is by keeping an open mind. Have some knowledge of cultural differences, practice active listening, and watch your non-verbal communication as well as your voice tone. Kindness and empathy are much appreciated in this context. In both the individual and organizational cases, resolution of the issue occurs when similarity and difference, unity and diversity are put into dialectal form. Assuming similarity allows us to appreciate differences, and unity provides focus for diversity.
Movement out of the ethnocentric condition of minimization to ethno-relative condition allows cultural difference to be organized into categories that are potentially as complex as one's own. In other words, people become conscious of themselves and others in cultural contexts that are equal in complexity but different in form, from something to be avoided to something to be sold out. This can be shown in the three situations in the given activity as follows.
The Philippines is indigenizing its basic education curriculum for the country's various ethnic groups to boost the development of what has been regarded as marginalized people without dissolving their respective cultures and traditions. our guidance counselor is committed to making sure that LGBTQ issues are heard. The participants of the Impresesa enjoyed witnessing various presentations of dances and music from other ASEAN countries.
The acceptance of cultural difference does not mean agreement. Cultural difference may be judged negatively, but the judgment is not ethnocentric, in the sense that it's not automatically based on deviation from one's own cultural position. People at the acceptance stage are curious about cultures and cultural differences, but their limited knowledge of other cultures and their growing perceptual flexibility does not allow them to easily adapt their behavior to different cultural contexts. In organization, the rhetoric and support structure for diversity and inclusion exists at this point of development. But the incorporation of intercultural sensitivity as a criterion for global or multicultural leadership is not yet established. The challenge of acceptance is the need to reconcile culture relatively with ethnicality. People at this stage want to be respectful of other cultures, and for that reason, they may adopt the naive and paralytic position of, it's not bad or good, it's just different. However, all behavior demands that judgments be made, including doing nothing. And the demand is to find basis of judgment that is not ethnocentric in either defense, superiority, or minimization, universalist terms. One such system that can be applied in both personal and organizational context is William Perry's ethical scheme. After resolving the ethnocentric ethical position of dualism and multiplicity, the scheme demands that decision makers engage contextual relativism, an understanding of goodness in context, before they make an ethical commitment.
Resolving the issue of ethicality allows the move to adaptation to cultural difference. The perceptual mechanism is that of perspective taking or empathy. Let us look at the situations where empathy is observed from the given activity. Please check your answers.
A straight classmate wears or displays LGBT-friendly buttons, stickers, or posters. An ALS volunteer from Australia spent time to study our currency, since dollars are not available in public market.
This is a kind of context shifting assumedly enabled by a neurological executive function that allows one to experience the world as if one is participating in a different culture. This imaginative participation generates feelings of appropriateness that guide the generation of authentic behavior in the alternative culture. The ultimate example of this shift in cultural terms is biculturalism, a mirror of bilingualism. In either case, the outcome of the context shift is the competent enactment of alternative behavior that is appropriate to the different context. Organizations at this point of development have policies and procedures that are intentionally flexible enough to work without undue cultural imposition in a range of cultural contexts. The issue of adaptation is authenticity. If people can shift among several cultural contexts, in which context do their true identities reside? The resolution of this dilemma lies in the extension of the definition of identity into a more dynamic container, one that can contain a wider repertoire of ways of being in the world. At an organizational level, adaptation is the essence of inclusion of both global and domestic diversity into organizational processes. Here are ways to increase intercultural sensitivity and competence in this stage. 1. Opportunities for interaction with other culture partners. 2. Facilitated multicultural group discussion. 3. Training in the practice of empathy. 4. Activities that relate to real-life situations. And 5. Facilitate opportunities for learners to practice behavior in known cultures. Ultimately, people here are actively looking at life through the perspective of others.
Integration is the final stage of intercultural sensitivity. Although it is not easy to achieve, the resolution of authentic identity allows for the sustainable integration of cultural difference into communication. Let's see if you got correctly the last two situations in the given activity. Here are they.
Mercy helped her non-English speaking co-participant communicate her ideas using the Google Translate. I am comfortable and I feel enjoyment every time I am able to make bridge between people who are of different cultures.
Before I proceed with my discussion, let us view this video clip showing this stage of intercultural sensitivity.
Perasaan Afifa ketemu mereka tuh sangat takut sebab Afifa takut banget sama orang yang beda agama. Pernah kejadian waktu SMP itu ada anak yang beda agama, udah egois, suka marah-marah, dan lagi dia itu menghina agama Afifa gitu.
Pertama kali saya dikunjungi sama panitia Sabang Merauke. Pada saat saya dengar seperti itu, ada pertukaran pelajar, terutama dalam hal toleransi. Saya sangat antusias dan saya sangat tertarik.
Sabang Merauke itu suatu gerakan positif yang mengusung tema toleransi, pendidikan, dan keindonesiaan, di mana hal itu penting buat Indonesia karena Indonesia kaya akan kebudayaan, terus keberagaman, etnis, dan agama.
Saya pribadi saya senang, tapi ada rasa was-was. Saya berpikir pasti tidak gampang, tapi saya rindu banget. Saya bisa dekat dengan dia.
Dua tiga hari itu Afifa mau minta pindah. Terus Afifa ngomong sama pembina Afifa namanya Kak Mustaf. Kata saya, Kak Mustaf, Afifa nggak betah tidur di tempat keluarga Kristen sebab Afifa takut diajak ke gereja, takut tidurnya gelap, nggak ada lampu, lampunya dimatikan.
Saya mungkin sempat kayak patah arang gitu ketika saya harus kasih dia makan gitu. Tawarin ini nggak mau, itu nggak mau, kayaknya itu mulai problem buat saya gitu.
Dengan kedatangan Afifa di tempat kita, ada satu hal yang sangat menarik. Bagaimana kita belajar, kita menerima Afifa apa adanya, walaupun kita berbeda agama. Saya bisa terpanggil dengan sendirinya memberikan fasilitas buat Afifa untuk sembahyang, buat dia ngaji di kamar dia sendiri. Dan kalau dia ke masjid, saya bisa antar dia.
Tadinya kan kita pikir kita yang kayak provider gitu, kita yang kedatangan tamu, dia ikut kita, mestinya dia belajar dari kita. Tapi sesungguhnya kita juga, kami sebagai tuan rumah, kami juga belajar dari Afifa gitu.
Ternyata yang saya alami itu tidak seperti yang saya pikirkan. Ternyata mereka tuh lebih baik dari yang Afifa pikirkan, jahat gimana gitu, nggak ada jahat. Afifa mengerti kalau perbedaan agama itu penting, pertama toleransi. Toleransi itu yang mengajar Afifa untuk menghargai orang lain. Selain agama Islam, Afifa juga harus menghargai orang yang beda agama.
Inilah kasih yang Tuhan mau. Walaupun kita beda keyakinan, beda suku, Tapi Tuhan maunya kita saling mengasihi.
Toleransi itu nggak hanya diucapkan tapi harus dirasakan.
We have seen how two different people met and harmoniously respect each other's beliefs and religion because of unconditional acceptance of an identity that is not based in any one culture. Each was able to facilitate constructive contact between two different cultures and understand each other very well. In this integrated condition, communication can shift from in-context to between-context states, allowing for the meta-coordination of meaning and action that defines intercultural communication. On a personal level, integration stage is experienced as a kind of developmental liminality where one's experience of self is expanded to include the movement in and out of different cultural worldviews. Cultural liminality can be used to construct cultural bridges and to conduct sophisticated cross-cultural mediation. Organizations at integration stage encourage the construction of third culture positions based on mutual adaptation in multicultural work groups, with the anticipation that third culture solutions generate added value. In this stage, gap is no longer visible. Oneness is practiced. A community of friendship and kinship becomes the culture. Understanding and practicing intercultural development is not an overnight process and come in handy phase, but one that takes time, continuous practice, and well-planned exposure in order to be good at it, especially when we deal with people in our workplace or anywhere else. Understanding and integrating what we know about intercultural development and sensitivity to people whom we dealt with, especially to those in our workplace or more so of our students, will result into people who are culturally effective and culturally competent. For our final activity, may I request you to answer this. Here's the direction. Provide one situation in the given issue in each of the DMIS stage based on your perception as teacher, administrator, manager, supervisor, or student. The issue is the Philippines being open to Afghan refugees. Here are the DMIS stages: denial, defense, minimization, acceptance, adaptation, and integration. Happy working!